is it like reviewing restaurants? And oh, it's like fast food. Like what's this all about? This place means so much to me, but if I don't go now, will I ever? The pinnacle of my career, the interview I've always wanted is LeBron James. It took a few days for my jaw to come off the floor. It was really, I mean, that's, I don't know if this is maybe overstating it, but it's a little bit like if McDonald's acquired Burger King. Now, I know why I'm getting these fees and why they're charging this much. And even I'm still like, how dare they?
Welcome back to Delivering More, folks. I'm your host, Ben Alkire. Thank you so much for consuming the content morning, afternoon, and evening. We appreciate it. As always, if you could hit that subscribe button down below, that's going to help us out more than you could ever know. I have another amazing guest on the Delivering More platform today. I have Group Director and Editorial at Informa Restaurant Food Group, which is also the parent company of Nation Restaurant News, Sam Oches, with me here today. Sam, how are we doing, sir?
Hey, Ben, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, of course. I appreciate you joining me here early Friday morning. Hopefully, I don't take up too much of your valued Friday time.
All good, all good. Friday, it's finally, I create some space in my calendar on Fridays to just ease myself into the weekend.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, doing what we can to get to the weekend. As always, I do. We've met previously and talked a little bit off pod, but I do want to get a little bit of your background for the audience. Let people get to know you a little bit more as well.
Sure.
So started out, where were you born? Where'd you grow up?
Born and raised in Athens, Ohio. I know you know a little bit about that. So Athens is a unique town in Southeast Ohio, home to Ohio University. Small Appalachian town, but beautiful, amazing little oasis in the state of Ohio that I am very proud to still call home. I now live in Columbus, and so only about an hour and a half away. So I like to get down and visit my parents in Athens. But yeah, I was raised there, and I went to Ohio University, which has a great journalism school. So it's still very much a part of me in Athens. And if anybody is looking for a fun little place to go for a quick trip, Athens is a good spot. Great food and drink spots there.
Yeah, Hocking Hills down there too.
That's right.
That's been a hot spot for some friends of mine. My sister was down there a couple weeks ago.
For those of you who think Ohio is all cornfields, you would be wrong, because the southeastern corner of Ohio is these great rolling hills, the foothills of Appalachia. So yeah, Hocking Hills, a ton of caves, great hiking. It's really becoming kind of the tourist destination for the state. So yeah, absolutely a great corner of the country to check out.
Oh yeah. And we'll get to our time at Ohio University. It's tough for me not to spend a lot of time on that conversation, but obviously that's not what we're here to talk about and focus on.
Yeah,
we will touch on it here in a moment. I did want to ask, what did you have a first job growing up? What age? Where were you? What was it?
So I'm the fourth of four. So as the youngest, I'm also the only boy for my parents. I have three older sisters. I was the lazy kid because by the time they got to me, my parents had given up. And so, growing up, I was just, they didn't force me to do anything. They were so exhausted by my three sisters. They're like, do whatever you want. So informally, my first job was working for my grandma because she lived next door at the time growing up. I would mow her lawn, do yard work, whatever. She'd pay me, under minimum wage, of course. But it was something to do, and I could say I had a job. But my first formal job then wasn't until my freshman year of college. I'm embarrassed to say it took me until I was 18 to get a job. And again, maybe relatable for you. I worked in the vice president for student affairs office at Ohio University as a student assistant. And I did that for 4 years. My entire college history, I spent in that student affairs office, which in the end actually ended up being very beneficial to my future career because I was interacting with all of the higher ups of the university, the president, the vice presidents. I was scheduling for all of them and all that good stuff. So it was an interesting perspective and set me up to have interactions later on with restaurant executives. But that was my first formal job that actually paid me.
Hey, yeah, whatever gets you that first foot in the door,
Absolutely.
No matter when it happens. I did want to obviously, we can move right into our time in Athens, Ohio. Then you were there to get a journalism degree, I believe. So at least you're putting the degree to work. I think at doing a good job at that at this point in time in your life. I have down here, you spent some time at the Post, the Athens Insider. Was all of that while you were enrolled at Ohio University?
Yeah, for sure. When you're a journalism student in college, everything is just clips. Get your clips. You got to get experience. You got to write the stories. OU has a great student newspaper called The Post that everybody kind of puts their time in. So I did that. There was also Athens Insider. I don't think it exists anymore, but at the time it was an alternative a weekly publication that was a part of the city's newspaper called the Athens Messenger. And I was going to be a music journalist when I was in college. All 4 years, I was really committed. I'm like, I need to be a music journalist because I love music. I am a musician. I wanted to review albums. I wanted to be like Cameron Crowe, Almost Famous. Like I was going to be that guy, Leonard Bernstein, the next Leonard Bernstein, writing for Rolling Stone. And so Athens is a great spot for that because it has a really dynamic and vibrant music scene that I was a part of during college. And so I had access to a lot of musicians there. And so every week I'd write about what's going on in the scene. And it was a ton of fun. The dirty little secret for any journalist knows very well, you don't make a dime, right? Because you're part of hundreds of kids in the same town, the same university who are trying to get those clips. And so all of the local publications will just use and abuse you and let you submit stuff to them for free. And I did that for 4 years. And again, it was a great experience and, honed my chops throughout those 4 years at OU. And as we now know, I did not become a music journalist, which is all good and well. And maybe we'll get to that. But yeah, that was 4 years of really grinding to try to set myself up for what could become my career.
Yeah, I did. I noticed now that the drum set, like cardstock, you got there behind you as well.
Yeah,
I'm a pretty big music buff as well. Are you a Nardwuar guy? Are you familiar with Nardwuar?
I'm not.
Okay, he's an interview. He's like an interviewer. He's been around for a long time. Famously, like interviewed Kurt Cobain like days before he had passed away, things like that. So
Gotcha.
Hardware. He's super intriguing as an interview style. He interviews a lot of hip hop acts nowadays, and he
Okay.
comes with like he'll talk about like songs they've sampled in their music nowadays, and he brings like gifts for them and things along those lines. And he always has like little tidbits that these like interviewees are like so amazed that he has knowledge of and information on. So I was just
Huh.
wondering where he gets that, like those tidbits of information. It's very intriguing to watch as an interviewer. I think you would find it interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I'll check that out. Yeah, I mean, look, journalism, podcasts make this look so easy because it's like, oh, we have a conversation. We're a journalist. But of course, a good journalist is doing their homework. They're doing the research. They're finding those tidbits. And as you probably know, I mean, you know about me. You did research into me before doing this interview. I have to do that before my podcast guests. Anybody I interview, you really have to put in that time to have that foundation of knowledge of who your guest is, so you can get deeper into their story and not have to collect those basic facts during the interview itself. So, but yeah, I'll check that out. I mean, and look, the music journalism experience I had in college, I think ended up similar to that job I had at OU, writing about music. I think it did me well to then go into writing about restaurants because music and restaurants are both art. They're both about creativity. Of course, we write about the business of it, but having a handle on, the people who make that art is ended up being a good foundation for me again to write about the restaurant industry.
Hell yeah, hell yeah. And then you get out of college. I have down here, you work for a construction magazine, Southeast Ohio magazine. Was that after Ohio University or was that
I was
during?
during actually. Those were all again some of the sort of steps up to what my career became. I did an internship in Chicago for building design and construction, a trade publication for an architecture magazine, or trade publication for the architecture industry, I should say. And then Southeast Ohio is sort of your capstone in the journalism school. So I had the pleasure of being editor in chief of Southeast Ohio the semester that I did that class, which was another really cool thing. It's a regional publication for that area, and so again, another very formative experience for me ahead of my career.
Nice. That's interesting. The capstone, obviously a big time thing to close out that degree and make sure you obtain it. So then your first job out of school and then immediately with restaurants was with QSR magazine.
Yeah, 1 week after graduation from OU, I moved to North Carolina and started as associate editor of QSR magazine. So, look, I count myself among the luckiest people in the world. You might notice from our conversation, I never worked in a restaurant. I didn't have that experience. Again, I was lazy in high school. I didn't get pushed out the door to go get a job. And so then when I was looking for jobs senior year, I graduated into the Great Recession. and was sending my resume all over the country to newspapers, magazines, anybody, and no bites anywhere, and I think I was sort of the beginning of that generation of, oh no, journalists aren't going to find jobs anymore. It was like gig work, freelance work was becoming a thing. Journalists were getting paid dirt, and it was a really scary, uncertain time, and I didn't know what was going to happen. Rewinding a little bit, starting with my junior year, my advisor suggested I look into business journalism, and so I started looking into that more and more. That was what led me to that internship at an architecture magazine. And eventually, at the end of spring of my senior year at OU, as I'm looking for jobs, I was like, okay, let's look into some of these business magazines. And I stumbled into this opening for the associate editor job at QSR, which to me was like, is it like reviewing restaurants? And it's like fast food? Like, what's this all about? And of course, that was not the case. And then was just incredibly lucky to get that job, moved to North Carolina. QSR is still based in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and I was there for 12 years.
That's crazy story and super impressive. I did want to ask before we get too far away from our time in Athens, Ohio. Do we have a favorite late night spot? That was you mentioned the good eats around town as well. Do we have any mainstay options on your daily or weeknights?
So I think while I was in college, Bronies opened. I don't know if Bronies is still there. So
Bronies. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. So Bronies was brand new when I was in college. And I don't mean to be that guy, but I liked to think that I had standards at OU. For those of you who don't know OU, it is considered a party school. Once upon a time, right after I graduated, maybe while you were in school there, it was the #1 party school in the country, which I'm sure was celebrated heartily on campus. And I think maybe you have, and I certainly have discovered since graduating, you realize that party school reputation is not the coolest thing in the world, because when I tell people where I went to school, the first thing they say is Buckeyes. I say, no, we're the Bobcats. That's Ohio State you're thinking about. And then the second thing they go, oh, party school. No, well, yeah, it is that. But I got a really great degree too. To answer your question though, like, there were spots like the Crystal and J Bar and Red Brick, Tony's. I think I would go to Tony's even though it was divey, because it was like kind of a towny crossed with college student bar. But then Bronies open. I was like, okay, I got standards. Maybe I'll drink at Tony's or at Bronies. And then Casa, that was a good spot. Of course, I was going to a lot of places where there were shows. So Casa was great for shows, live music. The Union was a great spot for shows. It burned down right after I graduated, maybe while you were there. And then now that I go back as an adult, because my parents are still in Athens, and so I'm there pretty frequently, Jackie O's is just the best. And, I have real taste and real standards now. And Jackie O's is this incredible brew pub. They've since blown up. They distribute to several states. They now have this gorgeous downtown Columbus facility here. So they've kind of made it big, so to speak. But once upon a time, they were just this small little brew pub in Athens that made incredible beer. So again, if you go to Athens, Jackie O's is the place to go.
Yeah. I think I've seen those Mystic Mama cans, those purple cans all over the place now. They pop up everywhere. What about if we're leaving? Bars are closing. We're 1:32 in the morning. Where are you stopping for food? Where are you trying to bite to eat?
Goodfellas, come on. It's always Goodfellas, which is pizza by the slice, but that real thick pizza slice that you would get. I think it was maybe $2 when I was there for a slice of that nice thick pizza. O'Betty's, once in a while for a real nice hot dog. And of course, DP Dough. DP Dough, which is delivered calzones. DP Dough, maybe not unfamiliar to some people listening, because they're chain with, I think, maybe 30 locations, around the Midwest. And that was a 2 a.m. delivery for sure with some DP Dough.
Yeah. So, and what I figured out about DP Dough, I don't know if a lot of people know this, they're open like till almost 3 and 4 a.m. sometimes when I was down there, and they deliver Ben & Jerry's ice cream.
That was new.
Menu. I don't know if it still is or is in different locations, but you used to be able to get ice cream delivered before Cold Stone was doing it, or any of these chains are doing it nowadays.
Nice.
That was my delivery hack, DP Dough. So yeah, I appreciate you indulging my questions there.
Sure.
kind of just move into the conversation in regard to restaurants and our
Mhm.
time within this realm of things. You mentioned being the associate editor at QSR Magazine. You then move up in regards to managing editor and becoming the editor of the entire magazine as a whole. Spent 12 years there, 2009 to 2021. In regard to just the magazine as a whole, in my realm of things, since I've been at DeliverThat, it's obviously a mainstay publication, right? You got Danny over there now. They're doing a ton of work. They're holding their own events. I think they have an event down in Atlanta coming up here in a couple weeks or a couple months, conferences, things of that nature. Over your 12 years there, did it feel like the publication and the coverage of restaurants was getting bigger and getting better while you spent your time there?
Yeah, for sure. When I started at QSR in 2009, there were several other restaurant publications in existence. And sadly, since then, I've watched several publications fold. So restaurants and institutions, food arts, a number of great titles have gone away. It's just sort of the state of the media world and consolidation. And when I started at QSR, we were fairly niche, right? I mean, only covering the quick service side of things. We were fairly small compared to Nation's Restaurant News and Restaurant Business. I think we always saw ourselves as, sort of the little brother of the industry. We had a sort of a chip on our shoulder, right? Because NRN out of New York and Restaurant Business out of Chicago, they kind of the titans of the industry. And here we were, this little dinky publication out of North Carolina. And that served us really well because I think we always thought, well, let's just do whatever, like just do what we think is right. And we did. And, for 12 years, I think we built something really special. And, Danny's still a close friend. I was really happy when I departed that he took my job because I hired Danny in 2015, I think he started, and we became pretty close while we were working together there. And when he came along, did an incredible job, really revolutionizing our digital footprint for QSR. So had a really good grasp on that. So they were in good hands, continue to be in very good hands. With Danny and Ben, who has since taken over the editor-in-chief role at QSR, and I think a lot of that started over a decade ago with just let's just try new things. Let's just do what we think is right for this industry. Sometime around 2014, 2015 was when we really identified that, the fast casual world in particular was coming up, and everybody was talking about Chipotle and all the brands that wanted to be Chipotle, the Chipotle of this or that. And that was about the time that I started recognizing that some of the entrepreneurs coming into the restaurant space were like my age, and they were like kind of like me, and I was becoming friends with them. And I was realizing, oh, like, there's this sort of entrepreneurial wave that sort of came into the restaurant industry about that time, most likely because of fast casual. I mean, you saw these guys who had gone into Wall Street banking and, decided this isn't for me. I've got some cash on hand because I was getting paid gobs of money being an investment banker, but I want to do something more entrepreneurial. And they're like, let's open a fast casual company, right? So you saw many, many folks, who were doing exactly that. And it was all about that same time. And I bring this up because that was when we really started to realize, let's really start to hone, or let's start to turn the spotlight on some of these emerging brands that are coming up, because not only are they interesting and, well, frankly, we found them more fun to cover because it wasn't, that really just sort of generic chain, but like also the bigger chains were looking at them and saying, well, this is innovation. This is what the millennials today want. And so it was very relevant to cover those emerging brands more and more because the big chains wanted to cover them. So anyway, I bring that up just to say, like, there was a real shift at that time to not just write about the big chains, but also write about some of those emerging chains. And there was a lot that I did in my time at QSR in that regard that really later led to my transition over to NRN. And then, we've since continued that here at NRN as well, is to try to create content that is valuable, not just to the big chain, because of course they are always relevant, but create content about and for the emerging restaurant leader.
Yeah. That's a lot to take in, to be honest. And I think it's just remarkable. I think as well. You're putting out articles, daily, whether it's 5, 6, 7 articles about different restaurants, different updates, different technology. I can't imagine the undertaking you guys do to make sure those stories get put together and published on time. It's got to be a lot going on. You close out your time with QSR, becoming the editorial director of Food News Media, who's the parent company of QSR and FSR. And then you transition, as you mentioned, to the same position with Informa in 2021, and as your position now, who's the parent company, as we mentioned at the top of the show, of NRN. What was that transition like? Was there an undertaking to make sure that relationship with QSR and Food News Media stayed prevalent and well developed? Obviously, I imagine going to a competitor of sorts might have rubbed people the wrong way. Was it an upward trajectory? Why did we want to make that move? And what was it like on your end deciding to do something like that?
Yeah, it was extraordinarily hard. Anybody who's been through a similar career transition, knows what that feels like, particularly when you go to a competitor. Look, I was at QSR for 12 years. The first 12 years really of my career, I owed, them everything, like, right. Like, and so I was very loyal. I was happy. But it was at the beginning of COVID that, and working from home, and you're just sort of alone a lot, thinking to yourself, like, what is my life? What am I doing now? What's going to happen next? I'm far from the only person who thought this, right? There was a lot of transition that happened in those early years, partly because we were all given this time to reflect. And on my reflection, it wasn't, I got to get out of here. I hate this place. It was, this place means so much to me, but if I don't go now, will I ever? And so when Nation's Restaurant News came to me saying that they had this position available, that kind of got in my brain, and it was a months long process of just reflecting, wondering if this was right for me. There was another part of it, which was my wife and I, we had, two little kids, and we were starting to feel like we wanted to move back to Ohio. North Carolina is just the most incredible place. I always wanted to live in North Carolina. Durham, where we lived, is just one of the coolest places on the planet Earth. But we needed help. And the pandemic reminded us that when you don't have babysitters for 2 years, you realize, I could use some family nearby. And so when the opportunity to move, or the opportunity to transition positions came open, the first question I asked was, can I be remote? And they said, yeah. And so it was like, okay, not only do I just sort of feel in my gut, like I got to take a chance on this, because I don't know if an opportunity like this will come open again, but also, this could be our ticket back to Ohio. That helped me make my decision. But, like anybody should do, I asked a lot of people I trust and respect, including people in the restaurant industry, just what they thought I should do. And a lot, the feedback came, you can't turn down a publication like Nation's Restaurant News. It's the titan of the industry. The comparison I made for a lot of people was, I felt like I played for Duke, but my goal was the Lakers. Like I was in a great spot, no doubt, but I saw NRN as being, this is the goal ultimately, is get to the top. And it's been that, and again, it was, not at all a reflection of the folks at QSR, who I still dearly miss working with, and thankfully still in communication with. And, it was really hard to make that announcement and to tell them what was going to happen, but they are all incredibly gracious, and it wasn't weird or awkward. But yeah, it's anybody in their career who has to make a similar decision. You just got to decide, like, if this opportunity is not, if this is kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity, you have to take it. You got to bet on yourself and take that chance. And that was what I did. And it was scary and stressful, and I had this pit in my stomach for a long time. But then I started at Informa with my team that I have today, and just made everything, feel right. And I've got an incredible team today, incredible opportunity that's come my way the last couple of years. And I know that the decision was the right one. And by the way, now that Danny's really flourished in his role, I think it worked out for both sides, because it's like Danny has come into his own, and I'm really proud of what he's been able to do there, and just know that he and I are both in the place that we're supposed to be.
Yeah, that's awesome. I am very happy to hear that relationship is still in good standing and things like that. And for me, similar to what you're talking about, making that leap, taking that leap of faith, I think relatively for me, I've been born and raised in Ohio, right? And I think anyone growing up Ohio, you're always so sick of the winters, right? And you tell yourself, hey, I'm gonna move away for a couple years, and worst comes to worst, you can always move back. Well, I never took that leap and I never left. You know what I mean? So I'm about to be 30 years old next April and I've never been out of Ohio. So at least you got to spend that time in North Carolina, got that kind of point of view, and now you've been able to move back, which I think is something a lot of people who grew up in Ohio have always kind of dreamed of doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, there's no right or wrong here. I think I've learned when you're sort of an idealistic young adult, I was willing to live anywhere, right? I mean, I wanted to live in North Carolina. I accomplished it, but if I'd gotten a job in, Colorado or Washington or whatever, like I was willing to move whatever, because yeah, I wanted that experience. The funny thing is you meet people from Ohio all over the place, because yeah, we all escaped, like we all got out, because yeah, you don't want the winter. You don't want, all due respect to Ohio, because I dearly love it. It's home, but it's not the most exciting place in the world, right? You look at the coast and you're like, okay, that could be a lot more fun to go to. Yeah, I had that 100%, but I went through that same old thing that I'm sure most people go through, which is you hit 30 and you start to think like, well, what's home? Where is home? And for my wife and I, that was Ohio still. Now, since we've been back, it's not been all rosy and, sunshine. We dearly miss our community from North Carolina. We are suddenly immersed almost too much in our family, right? There's so many people around us now that we went from having nobody to having everybody. But it is home, and it's, I'm an hour from my family, an hour from my in-laws, and you can't beat home. Now, it's not to say that I'm not ever going to live somewhere else. Like, I'm not going to be necessarily an Ohio lifer, but anybody out there, who has left home and either not gone back or come back, you just realize like there's something special about that place that is home.
Yeah. I can't agree with that anymore. We kind of move forward towards your time now with Informa and Nation Restaurant News. I'm not necessarily sure your start date, but in 2021, you started the Takeaway Pod. I had to scroll back, pages and pages and pages to find the original start date, because you've consistently been putting it out every single week. So I do just want to give you props on that. I've started out putting this podcast out week over week and moved to bi-weekly, just because the undertaking, booking the guests, making sure the content is ready and available. So just hats off to you and being able to consistently put out a product as good as the Takeaway Pod. I
Appreciate
did
that.
talk about it a little bit though. What is it like you to make sure you're cultivating topics and guests that are prevalent to what's going on now in today's conversation? Is that difficult for you? And then do you have any guests on the horizon that are white whales, or anyone, like Sean Walchef just had John Taffer on his podcast. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that's like, to me, that is like the cream of the crop. So anyone like that you would love to have on?
Well, my white whale is the pinnacle of my career. The interview I've always wanted is LeBron James, because
Amen.
look, big Cavs fan, as I'm sure you are as well. Big LeBron fan. LeBron and I are about the same age. He's a little bit older than me. So I've known of LeBron for much more than half my life, believe it or not, just because I remember when he was in high school and everybody was talking about him. But when he got in the restaurant industry, he invested in Blaze Pizza, and he was also a spokesperson for McDonald's, but he invested in Blaze Pizza. And one of the greatest moments of my career was I wrote a big story about Blaze Pizza, and he retweeted it. He didn't retweet me, but Blaze Pizza tweeted the link to my story, and he retweeted it with a comment. And I was like, okay, well, that's it. I've done everything that I need to do in my career. I'm done here. So yes, that was a high point for me, but he's always been, I've never gotten a chance to meet him or talk to him, but he would be the one. Sadly, before he unfortunately passed, Anthony Bourdain was that for a long time too, and I never got a chance to talk to him, unfortunately. But to go back to your original question, look, I cheat a little bit, which is that in the media world, people are always offering me interviews, and so I guess it's not as hard to cultivate the guests and to line the guests up, just because they're often just sort of brought to me like, hey, do you want to talk to so and so? But to your point, more it's like, okay, well, like trying to make sure you navigate from a topical standpoint of like, well, I already talked about that recently, so let's go in this direction, or that's a unique story. I try to blend bigger chain representatives with emerging brands. Like I was saying earlier, I've tended to skew toward emerging brands just because I find their stories are a lot more interesting. And no disrespect to anybody in bigger, from employed by bigger chains in America, but they're just more honest. You just get a lot more brutal honesty from the emerging brand folks.
And stuff like that.
Yeah, like, because if I talk to, big time CEO, look, it's great. You learn stuff, but they're polished, they're trained. They have some lines that they need to say, and I get that. But for a podcast in particular, that's not always the most helpful. So when I talk to somebody, like my episode that just came out last week, is with these two sisters in Los Angeles who have been vegan chefs for 20 years and had a vegan cooking school and write cookbooks, and they just opened their first restaurant. And for me, it's the perspective of, oh, well, the hook there is they're first-time restaurateurs. Like, that's kind of unique. Like, they have a pretty good, strong community of followers in Los Angeles because celebrities, hire them to teach them to cook and all this stuff. But they're first-time restaurateurs, and there's a unique story to that. For those of you who've been in the industry for many, many years and run restaurants for many, many years, a reflection on what is it like to open a restaurant, your first restaurant in 2023, right? Like, that was the hook there. And they are brutally honest about it because they're not trying to navigate anything. They're just like, hey, this is us. This is what we do. So that's where I like to find those stories. It's tough. Yeah, you just say kind of tough. You make sure you're providing a diversity of perspectives so that it keeps it fresh for your audience. But it's a lot of fun to figure out what those stories are and what that hook can be.
Yeah, it's impressive too. Obviously, just being able, like you said, for me too, I'm kind of on the emerging brand side as well. Just like you said, their stories are a little more impressive sometimes. That you kind of get like the war stories maybe as they've been coming up. Like they have like more. It's fresher in their mind as opposed to, like you said, a CEO who just the turnover. I feel like these CEOs change positions, change companies year over year, it seems like. So they might be brand new with the company and not really understand the full life cycle of that brand. So I'm on the emerging brand end too, I would say, for the most part. My only other question in regards to the Takeaway Pod, I know we talked about our studio here pre-recording here, but do you guys have any delve into the video aspect? I know on my end, a lot of the podcasts I consume, I watch the videos of them, whether it be on YouTube. I watch a lot like stand-up and comedian podcasts, things like that nature. Do you have any interest in creating a video product?
Yeah, we have started to share the podcast on YouTube and just the either Zoom or we use Riverside to record our podcast remotely. Like, we'll post those videos of the interview up to YouTube. It's funny. I mean, look, I feel like an old man compared to you, even just because I'm a few years older than you. But I never understood why people watched an interview because I'm like, podcasts for me were my commute once upon a time when I had a commute, which was like, it's passive listening. It's just something to occupy this time where otherwise I'm watching the road. Nowadays I do it on airplanes and stuff like that because I fly enough that it's like, okay, line up the podcast for that. And then, again, with two kids, I barely have time to do anything else ever. And I certainly can't watch any YouTube conversations. But to your point, I mean, our audience actually is now, YouTube is the biggest source of our audience for the podcast now. And whether people play it and do the passive listening where they just walk, I actually once upon a time talked to a chef who he said he listens to my podcast in the test kitchen. He puts it on YouTube and it's there and he can see the video, but he's focused on, doing his cooking. And I find that interesting because, again, I'm becoming an old man and that's not how I engage with podcasts, but I recognize that's how a lot of folks do. So yeah, we are investing more in the video, and frankly, just beyond podcasting, we're investing more and more in video. We know that that's where people want to consume content. One of the first things I did when I came into Nation's Restaurant News was to say, just take stock of the multimedia approach, because I was seeing it at QSR too. I had a podcast at QSR called Fast Forward. Danny's taken it over and rebranded as QSR Uncut, but I think you can still go back to that feed and find some of my old episodes there. I was really into podcasting, hosting a podcast, and we just pushed hard at NRN to really rev up the podcast platform. Did that. Been successful, been great, lots of fun. And then said, okay, now video, let's do that. And so we started doing a lot more around video. We've hired some contractors to do more professional video for us. So one I would flag for you is anybody who saw our brand icon package last year with White Castle. We did 3 videos that were much more professional quality because we had a contractor help us with them. And I got into the headquarters here in Columbus and, talked to them and learned their story. In a few days, I'm supposed to fly to Southern California to do one with won't tell you which company, but doing another one of those. And I say supposed to because Los Angeles is in the process of getting hit by a hurricane, apparently, which, hey, 2023, I guess that's what happens. Point being is I have a film crew coming with me. So we do some more investing. We're doing some more investment into video, high quality video. And it's just that balance. It's, some of the high quality video package, highly produced, with these just, people talking and kind of talking heads on a YouTube channel for a podcast conversation. And we're doing that. And then last thing I'd say too is, we're now also going into TikTok and Instagram. And we actually have somebody on our team who just does TikTok and Reels, because we've just found a lane for us, especially on TikTok. We do unboxing videos for fast food items. We've had a couple videos hit 5, 6, 7 million views. And we've gone from 0 to 7,000 followers on TikTok in the span of 6 months, which is incredible. And so we're going to keep pushing, right? We know people want their content that way. So we just got to keep giving it to them. And whatever the next thing is, I don't know, but we want to put our content on the channels where people are consuming, where they want their content. And increasingly that's multimedia.
Yeah. And I did want to just touch on, you mentioned the fast forward pod while you're at QSR. Do you ever, I don't know how you feel about this, but I don't necessarily, after I edit this for 5, 6 hours, I put it out, I usually don't typically go back and like watch it myself, since I've already listened to it over and over in the editing bay and things like that. Do you ever go back and re-listen to those shows and you're like, man, I sound so terrible here, I don't know why I asked that question? Like, compared to nowadays, I feel like you might feel like a veteran in the space. You feel like you're much more seasoned. You know how to get from question A to B to C, and you can guide the conversation along a little better. Do you just like look back and you're like, man, that was a little brutal?
No, I don't ever. I rarely listen to or read anything I created, because for me, it's like, it's not, and it's honestly, I've edited enough of my podcast to not care about the sound of my voice. Like a lot of people don't like the sound of their voice. I got over that many, many years ago, because it's like, okay, whatever, I guess this is my voice. But I don't go back to study it or anything like that, just because I don't know. I don't know if I would learn anything. And also maybe, yeah, it'd be a little cringy to be like, wow, old Sam asked some stupid questions. Now, I will say about fast forward, it was a labor of love. And I had a rule for the first, I guess, maybe 2 years of doing fast forward, that I would not do them remote. I would only do them in person. And it wasn't consistent. It wasn't weekly, but anytime I would travel, which was, maybe once a month, maybe once, every 6 weeks, I would take a backpack of equipment and I would, find somebody wherever city I was and do the interview in person. And what I wanted to do with that podcast was be the how I built this for restaurants, because I was really inspired by how I built this. I'm sure a lot of people listening to this now like that podcast. It was very, formative for entrepreneurs, especially. And I wanted to do that. I wanted to get into the stories of restaurant founders. And so I did that. And so my very first episode actually was Blaze Pizza. I was in LA. I went to their headquarters in Pasadena with my backpack of equipment and sat down with the Wetzels, who were the founders, and got the story of Blaze Pizza. And then I went to Doghouse, which was also in Pasadena. And then after that, sort of the floodgates open. And I think I did about 50 episodes that way, just traveling around the country, just taking my backpack and interviewing people in person. And I bring that up because there's a different nature to a conversation in person than one like this, where we're talking over Zoom, because it's just more conversational. It's, a little bit more comfortable. I think remote, you get a little bit right down to it, because it just doesn't have that similar nature, I guess. And then when the pandemic hit, I had to go remote. And so my entire sort of approach to podcasting changed at that point, because it was like, okay, well, now I have access to everybody, anybody I want to, I can talk to, but I'm doing it remote. And so the nature of things changed. And so when I started Takeaway, just out of the gate, it was like, well, these are going to be remote. Once in a while, I'll do an in-person one if I'm traveling, but so not really an answer to your question, but mostly just to say, if I listen back to fast forward now, I think I would just be so impressed at like, oh yeah, I used to do these all in person. Like, that was a lot of work.
Yeah, it's very interesting you bring that up, because before we started this a couple years ago, that was a sticking point for me. I really, really wanted it all to be, whether it was video or just audio, I really wanted it to be only in person. And obviously, that was as COVID was basically about to hit in what, 3 months or a year from then. So it would have just been logistically probably not feasible or possible at that point in time. But I'm on the same page with you. I think anything in person is much better. It's easier to consume. Just it flows a little easier. It feels, like you said, just a little more comfortable. So yeah, in person is always the go-to. And that's why I've been using these conferences as of late to try and, Food on Demand, the National Restaurant Association show. Anytime these people are going to be in one place, I'm trying to book as many people as possible, sit down with me for 20, 30 minutes and just get what you can. So I'm on the page there. Going into Informa as a business a little bit, I don't want to, press you too hard on prices and things like that nature, but a big news clip, I guess we could call it, from earlier this year, I believe early this year, was the acquisition of Winsight and all of the arms and overreaching companies that are underneath it. We're talking the National Restaurant Association show, Technomic, RLC, FS Tech, Restaurant Business Online, which we mentioned early on in the conversation. Was that, I mean, were you a part of that conversation? What was the undertaking like to make that happen? And what does that look like now on a day-to-day basis? Are you ahead of all of that content being put out? Does the overlapping of content happen all the time, I imagine, with, NRN and Restaurant Business Online? How's that all operate?
Yeah, a lot of questions that actually we haven't really answered yet, to be honest with you. When the acquisition happened, I was not part of the process of looking into that. So Informa, just to take a step back, Informa is based in London. It is the largest events management company in the world. So our parent company is actually primarily an events business. The media business is small but growing, and so we occupy that corner of Informa in the media world. And yeah, I mean, we've always been very competitive with Winsight. Of course, for us in the editorial side of things, it's a friendly competition. But when you're two different companies doing the same thing, you're competitive, right? And have always had tremendous respect for them. And then there were some breadcrumbs along the way where we knew some of the higher ups were making some moves in certain parts of the country where you're like, huh, something's happening. But when they told us, I found out a week before the National Restaurant Association show this year. And it took a few days for my jaw to come off the floor. It was really, I mean, that's, I don't know if this is maybe overstating it, but it's a little bit like if McDonald's acquired Burger King. You're like,
Right.
oh, whoa, like that's a big deal.
Right.
And so all of us were just completely blown away. And so that was a week before the NRA show in May. They announced it publicly 2 days before the NRA show. So literally we went into the NRA show brand new, knowing, oh, we own this show now. And it surprised everybody because it's huge. I mean, it is, it turns us all collectively, it turns us into one of, if not the biggest food service media company in the world. And it is just, it's just incredible. It's staggering the scale of what we are now. To answer your question a little bit more specifically, they, at the time they just said, business as usual. There's very much a house of brands approach to this at this point, which is like, we're all going about it, doing our thing. And so far we've been just conversations across the aisle, and it's been great. I mean, it's been a lot of fun because it's like, here are people I knew of and, know in passing and names that I see. And now we're working together. We're having conversations about, hey, what's this going to look like? How are we going to work together? And it's a blast. And so, like I said, I've had a ton of respect for like Jonathan Mays over at Restaurant Business. And, it's like, we're better together. And that's going to be really exciting once more formally that happens. But we so far don't know what that looks like. I will say in the conversations we've had about, okay, how do we bring something like Restaurant Business and NRN together? Initially, I was like, oh, yeah, like it's kind of like the same thing. How do you put those two things together? And the more and more discovery we do behind the two, the more and more I think both sides are realizing we're very complementary to each other. The paths that we've taken are both valuable and strong and successful, and different enough that when you bring them together, it's a lot more sort of comprehensive and stronger as the sum of our parts. And so, yeah, there's going to be sort of, awkward overlap of content that at some point we're going to have to figure out. And there are lots of questions that remain of how is this going to work. But the more we get to know each other, the further along in this process we go, the more we're like, oh, this is going to be special. Like when we come together, I think we're going to realize like we're going to be able to achieve a lot of the things that we wanted to do that we haven't, purely because of the resources available to us.
Yeah. Similar in the analogy, but I almost feel it's like it's almost like you guys, someone acquiring someone in the same market too. It'd be like if the Yankees acquired like the Mets or something like that. Like they start like join forces, and now you're a conglomerate of a baseball team, right? It's like now you're just a massive company. And we're talking about the news coming out prior to the NRA show this past year. RLC, I think, will happen again here. Well, FS Tech is coming up, I believe, in a couple weeks at this point in time. at the beginning of September, I believe.
September, yeah.
And you guys are now coming out with a new conference, a new product, this Create Show. And we've talked offline a little bit about this in regards to sponsoring an event and things of that nature. The approach you guys are taking with this conference, I think, not to call the other ones a little bit like stuffy or kind of oversaturated, maybe would be like a better adjective, something like that. But this sounds like we're taking like a new approach to the conference scene. So what are we expecting with this Create event? What was the talks behind the scenes in the lead up to actually bringing this product to fruition? And maybe we can just go from there.
Yeah, I mean, the bigger picture for Create is that Nation's Restaurant News hosted a conference called MUFSO for many, many years. I mean, I think 50 plus years, possibly. That, of course, stands for multi-unit food service operators. So that was geared toward bigger chains, much like the restaurant leadership conferences. And as I understand it, these things happened before I started at NRN, but at early COVID days, the decision was made that MUFSO had just kind of run its course, and it was time to put it out to pasture. And Create was a brand they had started in like 2019. They had come up with this brand, and the intention behind it was to serve the needs of the emerging restaurant leaders. So they came to the same conclusion I came to at QSR, which was the emerging restaurant leader is incredibly exciting and enormous potential. And of course, we see just a saturation of emerging brands all over the country, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of small emerging chains that, could become the next Kava, which just enjoyed, this huge IPO. And we wanted to serve their needs, right? So they came to that conclusion sometime around 2019. And then when the decision was made to retire MUFSO, they simultaneously made the decision that Create would be the event vehicle for NRN. So this is actually the third year for Create. We did it for 2 years in Denver. 2021 was the first, and then 2022. And again, like the intention behind Create was to say, let's have an event for emerging restaurant leaders. But the first 2 years of Create, I think we've been really kind of honing it and shaping it, morphing it, trying to get it to what it can be. Because MUFSO has always kind of loomed. A lot of people thought, oh, it's an event from NRN, it must be like MUFSO. But no, it was more like, we wanted this to be more for the emerging restaurant operator. So in some ways, the first two iterations were like a hybrid of the two. We had a lot of chain executives, which is great, and we welcome them to Create, absolutely. But we were really trying to make our content oriented to the emerging restaurant leader. And so it was a little bit, it was a little bit two-faced in that way. And it wasn't a bad thing, but it just was like, okay, we're finding our identity. This year, I think, is the first year we've really kind of figured our identity out. We moved it from Denver to Palm Springs, California. So it's a little bit more of a retreat, right? Denver, look, love Denver, don't get me wrong. But Denver is a pretty standard corporate, location for an event like that. Palm Springs, whereas, is more like you're getting away. It's going to be as much a vacation as it is a work event. And so in that retreat fashion, we want to create a space for emerging restaurant leaders to get away, have some fun in the sun for a couple of days, but in the process, get to know their peer restaurant leaders, right? It's really for those engagements, the interaction among emerging restaurant leaders, and to create a space again for them where they're not only going to learn from some incredible leaders, but they're going to have an experience that is unlike any other conference. One of the touch points I use for folks when I'm telling them about Create is I say it's a little bit like the South by Southwest for the restaurant industry. We don't have panel. We do a lot more like one-on-one sessions, more interactive, engaging sessions. And we have a few panels, but like we don't want to overdo it. We're a little bit more rapid fire, a lot more like half-hour sessions instead of the 1-hour sessions that you start to fall asleep during. Just wanted to sort of flip the paradigm on the traditional conference and say, how can we keep it fun? How can we, keep it engaging? How do we refresh the model? So this is what we've landed on. So yeah, we're October 1st through 3rd. We're hosting Create. Again, it's Palm Springs. You can't beat it. We're hosting it at the Margaritaville Resort, which is just amazing and incredible. And I got to go there in March to check it out, and it's awesome. We've got incredible speakers lined up. And, again, I'd stress the point that all in the restaurant industry are welcome. The executives of the biggest chains, I think, will still find a ton of value in the event. But we want to get the word out, especially to those folks who have a chain of, I don't put a number on it, but really like under 200 locations, I think would be our real wheelhouse to say that if you're running a smaller mid-sized chain with a lot of growth opportunity, Create's going to be kind of that, jumping off point for you into the next phase of growth where you're going to meet the people that you need to know for that growth. you're going to really, I think, understand the industry a lot better, understand, benchmark your own success a lot better. And then hopefully come back for Create every year. Nashville is next year. We're going to host it in Nashville. We want to keep kind of highlighting some, going to places that it's a little bit off the beaten path, but still kind of a retreat for you.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wasn't aware of the plans to move locations year over year. So I like that idea. You mentioned kind of the offshoot of the panels, right? And one-on-one conversations. We kind of talked previously in regard to like a one-on-one conversation being presented to like a group of folks, as opposed to, you mentioned like a panel, which is a room of hundreds of people. It's like a smaller classroom type setting, I would almost say, as opposed to a 300, 400 college room setting where it's like, are these kids even paying attention, right? Or do we even know what's actually going on here? Do you have anything lined up that we can reveal at this point in time who will be featured in those conversations, companies, individuals, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So our one-on-one sessions, we call them Ask the Experts, and you're talking like, a room of like 100 attendees and a one-on-one conversation between one of our editors and that expert. We have 8 Ask the Experts sessions. I'm going to try to get them all. I think I can remember them all, but bear with me here. Stacy Peterson, CEO of Jenny's, hometown favorite here in Columbus, of course. But Stacy used to be with Wingstop. She's an incredible leader. Mario Del Perro, the co-founder of Mendocino Farms, who now is he developed Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop Kitchen, the virtual brand. We have Jason Crane, the CEO of Slutty Vegan, just an incredible dynamic brand, an incredible leader of that brand, giving insights into how they're scaling that. Tracy Kim, the CEO of Dig out of New York, another really exciting fast casual. Steve Schlemon, the president of Ford's Garage, which is a very immersive, experiential casual dining concept. Andy Hooper, the CEO of Heart House, which is Kevin Hart's plant-based brand. Maria Rivera, the CEO of Small Sliders, incredibly dynamic leader for a brand that is going to just go from 0 to like 1,000 locations in no time at all. I think, is that 8? Hopefully that's 8. Hopefully I'm not forgetting anybody, but
Well, I should have been counting. I wasn't. I was just listening.
yeah, I wasn't. I should have been doing it on my fingers here, but anyway, you can tell from those leaders just really smart people who are going to share, get into their story, get into their, expertise, what they have to share. And again, that one-on-one structure versus the panel gives them a chance to go deeper on them and not just the generic answer to the question that they go down the panel. It's no disrespect to panels formats. And again, we're going to do a few of those. It's just to say, it's like, okay, Stacy Peterson has a lot to say about technology and innovation, and she's going to be talking about taking that big brand blueprint over to a smaller brand like Jenny's. And I want to give her the full half hour and not have her share that with a few other people. You know what I mean? So that's why we do that kind of format. And just to get into some of our other sessions, we're doing this really exciting Founders Forum main stage session. So this is for everybody on the first day of Create. We have 4 incredible leaders: Nathaniel Rue, co-founder of Sweetgreen; Jason McGowan, the founder of Crumble Cookies; Lauren Bailey, the founder of Postino Wine Cafe; and then Tim McInerney, the founder of Cooper's Hawk. And they're going to get into their journey as founders, and they'll be talking one at a time, but we're going to do it like a talk show where they kind of come out one at a time and sit on the couch. Again, we're trying to rethink. We hear you. I collect information all the time from people in the restaurant industry of what should we do and not do in a restaurant event. And we know that you want it to be shaken up. We need a refreshed model for what that event should look like. So these are the new things we're trying out and seeing how it works. Last thing I'll say is our keynoters. We have Danny Trejo is keynoting. Everybody knows Danny Trejo, even if they don't know his name. He's been in like 1,000 movies. You'll recognize his face. He's now a restaurateur. He has 8 restaurants, and he's going to be keynoting, one of our keynoters. And then Jack Lee, the founder of Data Central, is going to provide a really dynamic presentation on kind of the state of the industry as well as part of a keynote session.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in, and I'm excited. I think it's going to be, like you said, kind of just a good shake up to what these events and conferences typically are. I really like the avenue you guys are diving down and taking this route. Speaking on the keynote speaker though, I just want to take a little sidebar here. Danny Trejo, are you a movie guy? Do you have a favorite Danny Trejo film that he's been in?
It's funny because I went back to IMDb to just remind myself, like, what has he been in? He was in some of those Robert Rodriguez movies. Machete was his character, and it was like a series of movies, like grindhouse movies.
Yeah, like
Like,
so Ario, I think is like.
Yeah. Those are some of those movies I remember. But what's funny is as I was looking through his IMDb, I was also seeing a lot of the animated movies that he's a voice in that I'm like, oh, my kids love that. Oh, he's that voice. Yeah. So again, like if you Google Danny Trejo, you're like, oh, that guy, because he's just been in so many things. I talked to him yesterday because we were just as a prep call for the session, and he's just like he's a really fascinating dude. He's 79, believe it or not, but like he's a total spark plug. So it's going to be a lot of fun. It's a one-on-one conversation with me and him on the main stage for that keynote presentation, which is really cool. And yeah, just really quick, going back to your point too about shaking things up. I also wanted to highlight we're doing a few sessions that are roundtable discussions. And what we're doing is we'll have 4 tracks: technology, finance, experience, and operations. And we're going to do mini panels, like a 15-minute panel to start each one, and then break out into roundtable conversations. Again, we want to give everybody the opportunity to connect with each other, to have more conversations with each other, speaking with instead of being spoken at kind of our notion here. And all of these things are just, immerse people into the conversation going on, be a part of the content instead of, again, just sitting there and, zoning out as people talk at you for hours on end.
Yeah, I'm all for it. I did want to just give you opportunity here. If people aren't signed up to come to the event, if they want more information, should they reach out to you? Is there a website? Where can they go to get anything like that?
Sure. It's create.nrn.com. If you go there, all the information is right there about how to register. It's free. If you're a restaurant leader, operator, owner, it is completely free for you to attend. We've learned our lesson in the past. People they want free stuff. But it's also just our pleasure to be able to offer an opportunity like this for folks who are free. Just get yourself to Palm Springs, and the event itself is free. The other thing, by the way, if you go to that website, you'll see a tab at the top for something called our Investment Summit. That was something we launched just a couple weeks ago. And this came out of that idea of, how do we provide those resources, those connections for emerging leaders that they really need. And one of those relationships they need is relationships with the investors, private equity groups, banks, those folks who can help finance your growth. So we're launching this thing called the Investment Summit. It's on the first day of Create, October 1st. We're literally doing it on top of a mountain, Mount San Jacinto in Palm Springs. We're going to take a tram to the top of the mountain where there's a room we're going to gather. And it's going to be some education from the investors and then roundtable networking. So if you are an emerging restaurant leader and you are looking for, if not actually, capital to grow, but even just connections with the investors for down the road when you are looking for capital to grow, that's just, this is the opportunity to go to something like that is incredibly valuable. And it is also free. So if you register for Create, you check a box, I want to come to the Investment Summit. There you go. You're in. I don't know when this episode publishes, but spots are going quickly. So, as soon as you hear this, if that sounds appealing to you, go to create.nrn.com and make sure you register for it, because it's a really, really great opportunity to come and be part of that.
Hell yeah. I think I think it's slated to come out, I think September, either first or third week of September, I think. So should be
Okay.
just time for the event, and it should be some time for those folks to get involved in the Investment Summit as well. I appreciate you indulging my Danny Trejo question there. I was Spy Kids to answer for me.
Spy Kids.
Spy Kids was his first delve into my lifetime. So
by the way, though, and I didn't realize this until I started looking into like his Wikipedia. It's the same character in Spy Kids that was in that Grindhouse. Like is Machete in both of those movies, which is wild to me, because the Grindhouse movies where he's Machete, those are like bloody killing movies. But his same character from Spy, it blows my mind, because it's the same director. It's Robert Rodriguez.
Disney universe kind of thing. We're just the same role. That's
right.
That's super intriguing. I appreciate you indulging me in this time and taking so much time to speak with me today. I just want to close things out. Obviously, DeliverThat, we are a third-party catering delivery service. Food delivery has become, and catering specifically, become a huge aspect of revenue driving for these restaurants over the past few years since the pandemic and things of that nature. And specifically, content that's being produced around catering has kind of seen a gradual uptick over the past few years as well, which has been very appreciated on our side of things. Specifically, you had Earlier in May, Wawa doubling down on their catering business. Wendy's, I think that was just released this week, has the new concept with a delivery pickup window specifically outside of the store location. Outback in August, catering mentioned 5 times. Noodles and Company in article catering's mentioned 6 times. And Savvy Sliders, who we mentioned earlier, catering was the title of the article. So on your end of things, is food delivery here to stay? I know there's a huge debate on, is it on a downturn? Is it an upturn? What are you seeing on your end? Are people wanting to talk about catering? Do they want more information on catering? How are things like for you guys on the magazine side of things?
From the restaurant perspective, absolutely. Catering is an incredible opportunity. I mean, mostly because, ever since the beginning of the pandemic, especially, everything has been really omni-channel oriented. You can no longer be just focused on dine in, just focused on drive-through, takeout. You've got to be really meet the customer in all of those channels. And that includes catering because if you don't put your menu out there for catering opportunities, it's obviously, as a huge business that you're missing out on. And now that things are back to normal post-pandemic and, people are not totally back to the office, but there are still, plenty of office parties and lunches, and people are congregating back to regular levels, and catering has to be a part of that. But, if I think about it too, from that perspective of some of these emerging brands, those brands, when you consider the many, many thousands of restaurants out there who are like, they've got 3, 4, 5 locations, they're just kind of figuring things out and understanding like what's our core audience here. And I mean, they might not have thought of catering yet, right now. And no, again, disrespect to the big chains that are really strong at catering, but some of these folks out there who are regular customers of catering, like the offices and the event venues or whatever, they're going to start wanting some more adventurous foods. So it's an incredible opportunity if you're a slider brand, or if you're, if you do, Mediterranean, global, whatever. There's opportunity there for catering because people want to look past sometimes that typical sandwich, burrito, whatever. They want something a little bit more exciting. So catering has to be a part of what we talk about and write about. And I think the restaurants see that opportunity. And as long as they do, we will continue to write about it. To the point about delivery in general, it's interesting because you and I are talking right after second quarter earnings announcements. And a lot of companies announced that their delivery is down. And now DoorDash and the third-party delivery, their traffic is actually up. But the restaurants themselves are seeing more customers do pickup than delivery. Which still, can work for catering, but like delivery in particular, I think we are hitting the fee fatigue. I can say myself, I've talked about this on our podcast, which is I've had some, experiences with third-party delivery recently where I spent maybe double what I would have been willing to spend on that meal if I had just picked it up. But because I was lazy and whatever reason, I wanted to get it delivered. And I mean, I know why I'm getting these fees and why they're charging this much. And even I'm still like, how dare they? Like, don't they know, like, I've got a food budget just like anybody else. I don't want to spend $30 on chicken wings and an order of fries, which is a real true story that happened to me recently. So the average consumer is hitting fee fatigue, and they're going to start getting their butt in their car and driving over to pick it up instead of having it delivered because they can save $5. So I do think delivery as a whole, we've kind of maybe plateau for the time being. It's of course not going to go away. And I think it will even surge again another time. The industry collectively has got to figure out these fees and these charges and costs. And the third party obviously has to be a part of that. I don't know how catering factors into that. I'm sure you guys are thinking a lot about this, but catering is going to be a part of that conversation too, because, those regular catering customers similarly might start looking at that cost and be like, okay, catering's getting a little out of control now. We got to rein this in.
Yeah. I think for me, to touch on where you started initially, the acquisition of customer for a catering opportunity is, exponential, right? Instead of 1 or 2 person order, you're talking 30, 40, 50, 100 plus people in an office building, in a hospital, in a doctor's office, things of that nature, where you're immediately having them introduction to your product, to your offerings, things of that nature. So that's always a huge point that we like to make in the catering realm. But I'm on the same page as you as far as third party delivery, right? I think I use DoorDash, I use Uber Eats. I agree with you. We are in the business, so we understand why those fees are there. But yeah, again, I think not like Mr. Beast and those things of nature specifically. I paid, I think, like $65 to get that product for 3 burgers and fries. And that was going 5 miles down the road. So like, that's obviously just an absurd spend for a couple of burgers that, if you make that at home, it's $5-10 for a couple pounds of ground beef, some buns, cheese, and things of that nature. So yeah, I'm on the same page with you there as well. I think there's got to be some common ground found within these developments at some point in time.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Well, Sam, again, man, I know we went a little over here, so I do appreciate, again, your time. Indulge my last question there about catering delivery and just give me some background on you, man. I know we've met previously, but it's great to kind of hear directly from the source, where you grew up, how you came about this business and what you guys are planning for the future. So thank you so much. I hope the audience enjoys the conversation, and we'll see you soon, hopefully at that Create event.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ben. I appreciate you having me on.